Island Reserves, the gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
I think we're ready to close.
I seek recognition.
For
I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
the gentleman is recognized.
I just want to respond, Madam Speaker, briefly to the last speaker suggesting that somehow this isn't going to solve all the problems of gun violence. No one suggested it is. This is a simple bill that is introduced to protect law enforcement and members of the community when an active shooter happens. We can continue to fight about how we should reduce gun violence, but when it occurs, this will save lives. It's not intended to be the solution, the big answer to everything. It's intended to save lives. And I will repeat again, with all due respect to my Republican colleagues who think they're experts in policing, who think they know better than law enforcement what they need when they run into danger. Easy to say that in the comfort of the House chamber, where you're protected by Capitol Police and you get alerts. These are men and women that are running into bullets in communities that are threatened by it. You raised what happened on 14th Street. A young man who works for me received a notice 35 minutes after the scene was cleared through his Ring security system in his building that there was an active shooter. Had there been one in place, he would have been notified and not walked into danger. So, you know, when you have National Sheriff's Association, FOP, I'm going to just read to you. Now, these are admittedly people who actually are responsible for keeping communities safe, unlike anyone who just spoke on the Republican side. They say, this will be very helpful to us. It will help us keep communities safe. And the CEO of the National Sheriff's Association, this alert system will be another excellent tool for law enforcement to do its job. That's a quote. Brian Porter from the National District Attorneys Association, this bipartisan legislation creates a new alert system for law enforcement to alert the public when there are active shooters while also providing resources as our members work to keep our communities safe, end quote. Jerry Williams, president of the Major Chiefs Association, this which will undoubtedly be a valuable tool and a resource for law enforcement agencies. Bill Johnson, the National Association of Police Organizations, the Active Shooter Alert Act will assist law enforcement in alerting citizens of an active shooter situation in their vicinity, keeping them away from the incident and maintaining their safety. And finally, Patrick Yoes, the national president of the Fraternal Order of Police, says this bill will help improve the ways officers and agencies communicate with the public about active threats. I could read 10 more quotes from people who actually do this work. And the North Carolina State Chiefs of Police have also endorsed this bill, which I think should be important to Mr. Bishop, who just spoke. But look, these are men and women who do the job every day. And they're saying they need this. It will be useful. It doesn't solve all the problems, but it works. And the notion that, well, you can just do it, it's redundant, it's just not true. This bill has in it provisions that will provide the development of protocols, the sharing of best practices, a law enforcement advisory group, things that will make sure the active shooter alert works even better. And it's made available to communities that may not have all those resources to support the implementation of this system. Can anyone say that every single American doesn't deserve to get this information and every member of law enforcement doesn't deserve to get this information so they don't go into a dangerous situation? I know it's difficult because you somehow have it in your head that Democrats are up to something. Well, I don't think Fred Upton and Victoria Spartz and Peter Meyer and Nancy Mace and Don Bacon and Andrew Garbarino and Jay Obernaut, Jefferson Van Drew, Jennifer Gonzalez-Colon, Brian Fitzpatrick, John Carter, Tom Rice, Michael McCall, Kelly Armstrong, David McKinley, and Julia Letlow. Those are all Republican original co-sponsors. You think they're up to something too? They're just trying to keep their communities safe and give law enforcement the tools they need. We can argue about what's the underlying cause of crime. I'm happy to have that debate. This bill is not about that. It's about protecting people when an active shooting incident happens. And the final thing I would say is, if you look at the after-action reports that are done after active shootings, almost without exception, they all reference it would have made a real difference if we had a good communication system. In the situation that Mr. Upton talked about in Kalamazoo, in their after-action report, they said, neither the Kalamazoo Department of Public Safety or the Sheriff's Office had a strong social media presence at the time of the shooting, which hampered the department's ability to update the community on the progression of the incident, notify them when the arrest was made, and reassure them when they were indeed safe from further violence. In the Columbine shooting, in the after-action report, they say, our school's greatest vulnerabilities exist because of voids in basic security policies and strategies, such as effective communications and notification systems. In the Broward County incident in the Hollywood airport in 2017, they write in their after-action report, review and budget for improvements to public notification systems, including visual paging, overhead announcements, and mass notification systems would be helpful. It was noted during the events, airport patrons lost personal items except one, their cellular phones. The ability to reach every cell phone with messengers enables law enforcement to provide instant information directly to victims. It goes on and on and on. So again, police are asking for this. The after-action reports underscore the need for it. Set aside the fact that the lead sponsor or the author is me. 15 other Democrats, 15 other Republicans, very bipartisan. And I haven't heard any argument why we shouldn't give law enforcement what was identified as one of their top priorities during Police Week. So with that, I'll reserve so I can close. And
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from... excuse me, I apologize. Members are reminded to address their remarks to the chair. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Madam Speaker, we're prepared to close. Okay.
Yeah.
I would urge my colleagues, Madam Speaker, I would urge my colleagues to vote no. First, as the gentleman from North Carolina said, this bill is redundant. There are 1,400 alerting authorities across the country that already alert citizens in those communities to an active shooter. So it's redundant. Second, it does seek to undermine the Second Amendment. And don't take my word for it. Take one of the Democrat supporters of the legislation on the Judiciary Committee. Here's what he said. This bill would be most effective at reminding us that the threat of gun violence exists all around us, but it does little to actually protect us. So this is all in this, and you got to view it in context. Remember, the last 4 weeks, all Democrats have talked about, all they've talked about is taking away people's Second Amendment liberties. We got this huge debate going on in the Senate right now. Red flag laws where you have no due process. Someone doesn't like you, comes and says, we're gonna take away so-and-so's firearm, goes to a judge or law enforcement, take away their firearm. There's a hearing you're not allowed to be at, they take it away, and then you got to go get it back. Your fundamental liberty, taking your property, your rights from you. This is the context with which they bring this legislation. And maybe the third most reason is I don't know who in their right mind would want to give the Department of Justice more authority in light of what we've seen from this Department of Justice. Frankly, I don't know why you'd give any Democrat-run Department of Justice more authority after what we've seen from the Obama Justice Department and now what we see from the Biden Justice Department. Obama Justice Department spied on a presidential campaign. The Biden Justice Department is treating moms and dads as terrorists, using domestic terrorist counterterrorism measures, the Patriot Act, against parents, for goodness sake. And we know that because we've had multiple FBI agents come forward as whistleblowers and tell us about the over 24 investigations into parents. One of those parents investigated simply because they owned a firearm. So that's the context and why we have concerns with this legislation. So I hope we vote no on this. I hope we do, and more importantly, I hope the Senate doesn't pass this package they're talking about, which would certainly undermine liberties of law-abiding American citizens. And with that, Madam Speaker, I yield back the balance of our time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Rhode Island is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, if I were a classroom teacher right now, I would say to the gentleman from Ohio, focus. Pay attention to what we're talking about. What we're talking about is an active shooter alert. We're not talking about a red flag bill. We're not talking about any effort to undermine the Second Amendment. We're not talking about education policy. We're talking about one thing. Can we help keep people safe? This isn't redundant because while it's being used by 1,400 agencies or cities or towns around the country, there are thousands and thousands who have not used it because they can't access, because they don't have the resources, the protocols, the best practices. This will allow them. If we save one life, if because of the active shooter we save one child, one police officer, it will have been worth it. And so I urge my colleagues to vote yes on 6538. Give our law enforcement men and women, the brave men and women who keep our communities safe, every tool they need to keep themselves safe and keep the communities they serve safe. Don't take my word for it, take theirs. They've all endorsed it. They're asking for a yes. I yield back the balance of my time.